Hello, everyone, and welcome to this presentation on creating a statewide system for providing AIM. My name is Luis Perez, and I'm a Technical Assistant Specialist at CAS, where I work on the National Center on Accessible Educational Materials, but we go by the AIM Center for short. Today, I'm joined by Carson Cochran, who's a Program Manager for the Georgia Department of Education, and Summer Smith, an AT Specialist for Marietta City Schools in Georgia. Carson, could you go ahead and quickly introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you, Luis. As Luis said, I'm Carson Cochran with the Georgia Department of Education. I am the manager of the Georgia Instructional Materials Center and am very proud to be a leading member of the 7-state cohort for the next 4 years, and look forward to seeing what we can do in Georgia.
And Summer, could you go ahead and do a quick introduction as well?
Sure. Thank you, Luis. My name is Summer Smith, and I am a certified speech language pathologist and the assistive technology specialist for Marietta City Schools. And I am on this panel today to discuss our engagement in the AIM project.
Thanks so much, Carson and Summer. We'll hear more from you in just a bit. The goal for this session is to provide you with some ideas for how SEAs and LEAs can begin partnering to build a robust statewide system for the provision of AIM and to support the use of AIM as well. Before I turn it over to Carson and Summer, I would like to provide a little bit of background about the AIM Center to frame our discussion. The goal of the AIM Center is to increase both the availability and the use of high-quality, accessible educational materials and technologies for all learners with disabilities across the lifespan, from early learning to K-12, and then from K-12 to higher education and the workforce. We partner in this work with a national cohort of states that are receiving technical assistance from the center so that together we can learn from each other about promising practices for the provision of AIM. Georgia, whom you'll hear from today, is one of those states. The others are Oregon, Oklahoma, Missouri, North Carolina, West Virginia, and New Hampshire. The AIM Center assists states in building a coordinated system for the provision of AIM by providing intensive technical assistance to each state's K-12 leadership team, and then targeted technical assistance to each state's interagency collaborative. That interagency collaborative includes representatives from early learning programs, higher education institutions, and workforce development agencies. Working together, the K-12 leadership team and the interagency collaborative can develop a coordinated system that provides a seamless transition for learners throughout their educational experience, from when they start in early learning to when they transition to higher education and the workforce. The technical assistance the center provides is grounded in a set of AIM quality indicators. These quality indicators describe the essential elements of a high quality and robust system for the provision of AIM. Those quality indicators are a coordinated system, provision in a timely manner, having written guidelines, providing professional learning opportunities and technical assistance, collecting and using data, and the allocation of resources. To support states and districts in self-assessing and monitoring their progress on the implementation of these quality indicators, the AIM Center developed the AIM Pilot, which is available at aem-pilot.cas.org. Now that you've learned a little bit about the AIM Center and the AIM cohort, I will turn it over to Carson, who will explain how Georgia is approaching this work. Carson?
Thanks, Luis. We have a lot of parallel in what the state level teams are doing, as well as what's happening at the local level. We're actually partnering with 3 districts in Georgia, Marietta City, where Summer is from, my co-presenter here, as well as Tift County and Paulding counties. So we were applying for the cohorts to be a member of the cohort, and we were looking at the different schools and the systems in the state. And I just wanted to, in that whole selection process, wanted Summer to describe how they felt in Marietta City when we approached them as a whole to ask them to participate in the cohort. Summer?
Sure. So if I'm being honest here, We
Absolutely.
were very nervous when we were selected because we were thinking, oh my goodness, we must have done something wrong. Why is the state wanting to talk to us about this? And then once we found out more information about it, then we were really excited to be able to hopefully make some changes for the positive within our district. Once we started with the AIM pilot, we then found out that it wasn't just for this school year, it was for 4 years. So then we felt some mixed emotions again, and we're like, wow, this is going to be a lot of work. However, it's meaningful work, and we're to the point now where we feel really good about what we're doing and really excited about it. But honestly, in the beginning, we were extremely nervous. We didn't know what we were getting ourselves into. And then, we didn't know if there was a reason that we were chosen, but I'm glad that we weren't in trouble for something and that we are doing good.
You were not in trouble. And there was a reason. I mean, we've got a lot of districts in the state of Georgia, and we're looking at districts with varying sizes. So a large district, a medium district, and a small district. Marietta definitely fits in that small district. And you have what, eight schools, I believe? Is that right? Or
we have 8 elementary. Well, I think it's actually 7 elementary. We have 12 schools total.
Gotcha. So they have a small amount of local schools. And also we were impressed by the things that they had going on in their district, as well as the administrative staff, and our belief that that administrative staff would indeed support this team as a whole, and not just a special ed initiative, but we really had the belief that Marietta would pick up the ball and run with it as a district as a whole. Because what we're, remember our vision, which we'll get to, is for all students. And all of the students in Georgia, we want to have access to educational materials in the right format, and we also want them to have the accessible technology to make those accessible formats accessible, if you will. Luis?
Thank you, Carson, for sharing that vision. The first question that we're going to address is related to cross-functional teams. So what are some of the roles and responsibilities that need to be included in those cross-functional teams so that we are developing a coordinated AIM system at the state level?
At the state level, it's very interesting. As the application process began, I actually created 2 different applications, one with one set of members on the state team, the second with another set of members. And we deliberated back and forth, which application is the best with our partners. The application itself drives the selection. So you've got a set number of people or set positions that you really need to have represented at your level. And we felt like we had so many, it was hard to really make that choice. But what we really realized, and I believe Summer is in their local system is going to talk about what they did as well. But our members are set on our team, but it's also very fluid. We have a lot of resources out there. So what we're basically doing is going outside of our state team and pulling in members as we need. So it's not hard and tight that you have to stick to only those members on your team, but to be fluid and flexible and to pull in the expertise in those areas where you need, because we don't know, individually, we don't know everything, but collectively, we've got it going. And so, Summer, share some of the things that you discovered as you were building your team and how it expanded.
Sure. So we started off basically with what Carson was saying with the application process. We were told these are the members you need to have on your team to start this. So we built our team with our assistant superintendent of special services, our special ed director, myself, the assistive technology specialist, our IT supervisor, a general ed teacher, and then a parent. And we were feeling good. We were the only team from Georgia who actually got a parent to attend. We felt like rock stars. We were going to be the best team. And then we were given our first task, which was to come up with our coordinated system. And we got back to Marietta City and realized we did not have everybody at the table that we needed. And so for our crew that is going to put in a lot of the work, we had everybody who needed there, but we needed more brain power. And so we have added some extended crew members in Marietta City who were able to help us get the ball rolling in certain areas. So now our team also has the Executive Director of Academic Achievement, the Technology and Innovation Coordinator, our Vision Impaired teacher, our DHH teacher, our Special Education Lead teacher, our support teachers, and there are like 8 of them. So we have all of them on our team. We have our MTSS coordinators from each school and our ESOL department, because what we were finding is we really needed more brains to be able to make the changes that we wanted to make. And so it's actually been a great thing for building relationships and getting the information we need. And since we're such a small district, we are able to build those relationships, but sometimes that part is easier, but sometimes it's harder because there's not as many of us. So we often wear multiple hats and do different jobs. So it is nice to be able to figure out who has the needed information. We know someone has it, and for us to all work together to make this happen.
And I think one of the benefits, just to echo what Summer said, is that, as we at the state level began the same process the district is doing, and we began discovering that we didn't know everything that was going on, we began to learn more about what other units were doing and how that work basically relates to what we're set out to do. I mean, our whole state vision is to have all students that are ready to learn, live, and lead. And so they do that by having access to the curriculum. So it's a very, very good situation on our side where everything is meshing together. And we're beginning to break down, if you will, those silos that we always talk about.
Mm-hmm. I do think having a parent on our board was kind of eye-opening. She came to our state meeting and heard some information and brought the information back to us. We did not realize that her son had never received his reading material, which needs to be enlarged at the same time as his gen ed peers. And that's not something that is acceptable, but it's something that it was happening. And so it was very painful to hear, but it's something that we needed to hear. And it's we already have it ready for him for this school year coming up. So it's something you really need all the different perspectives on your panel to make it to make the changes needed. So even if it's painful, it's still needed for growth. So I think that has probably been our most effective person on our team to start the change.
Hopefully some of those materials came from the Georgia Instruction Materials Center.
They did.
Very good. I think we're ready for the second question, Luis.
So once we have a cross-functional team, how can states and districts work together to identify gaps in processes for providing AIM?
Well, one of the things that we found, and Luis mentioned this earlier in the description of the cohort and the resources that are available through CAST, is the AIM pilot and those quality indicators. Having that common goal and that common language to begin communicating. We at the state level went through the pilot. We analyzed the quality indicators, and really what we did, we looked at 3 this first year, and then we requested the districts work through it on one of the meetings with us, just to begin delving into what the AIM pilot was and to answering those questions. And we were just doing some pulse checks with the district on quality indicator 1 to see how things were going. But it did give us that commonality because we're not asking them to do, the local districts, anything that we're not doing at the state level. And we saw some things that we thought we were doing a really great job at. And when we really started digging into some stuff, we found, there's places where we can do better. And we're always looking at, if you know better, you do better. And that's what this is really about. It's examining our procedures and how we're communicating and offering assistance to districts, and making us better at doing it. Summer, I know that you guys went back and forth on your pilot. Describe some of the things that you found out.
Well, we mainly focused on that coordinated system and the procurement process. And we found out that there are people in our district who know the answers to all of this, but not everyone who was involved in the procurement process knew the correct answers. So we were able to reach out to the state and use the AIM pilot to determine what language we needed to put in those procurement documents so we could have the right accessible materials. The way that our school district is set up, there is a lot of individuality allowed at each school. And so it might have different curriculums or reading materials that are approved for each school that the administrators within that building are making those purchases. So our supervisors are working together to build some administrative guidance that would go out to all the administrators in Marietta City, showing them what that accessible material language needs to be and how it could be uniform within our district, but still allow them the flexibility to purchase whatever materials are needed for their students. But then that way we are purchasing accessible materials, so it's really going to be individualized for all of their students within their building. I don't believe that we realized that we didn't have that language in all of our documents. We had it in some, but then we've got so many different administrators ordering things. We didn't have a procedure set in place saying this is the language that you need to put in there. And so now they are working towards putting that administrative guidance together that they can share with everyone in our district. So that has been a gap that we were able to identify, but that y'all were able to help support us in.
And the support goes both ways, because at the state level, our procurement processes are so different than what the local agencies have. And there are going to be differences for however many numbers of school districts we have. There are going to be that many differences. But with what the work of our districts of doing this, we can then incorporate those procedures or for exemplars for other districts across the state and train on those. And I know that we had resources on the gimc.org website that gave the old contract language when we were a selection state, as well as pointing resources to CAST. But they were there and only a few people saw them. And so that's one of the things that we are looking at, is that technical assistance and training and how to get that out. The other things that we looked at for the districts and supporting is, how do districts really make that determination of whether a student needs AIM, like for text to speech. So we're looking at providing UPAR for at least 1 to 2 districts, or 1 to 2 schools per district, to get that process going, as well as we have a partnership with Georgia Tech Tools for Life, our Tech Act partner, to supply assistive technology and consultation. We're providing text help for all special ed students across the state. So those programs, like I said, are working together, and we're finding out more and more what the districts are needing from us as the state.
Great. We're going to transition to our final question, which has to do with IEP guidance. So how can IEP guidance be used for special factors consideration of AIM and AT to improve coordination, provision, and use of both?
So Luis, I'm going to start this. At the local level, I feel that the special factors consideration it's not forgotten, but it is glazed over. I've been in many IEPs where we would hear the teacher say, well, they don't need assistive technology. And that would be the full discussion. So for the past 2 years in Marietta City, we have been doing trainings within each building to try and build capacity in the area of assistive technology and special factors and what should go in each of these sections. If I were to go and pick an IEP today, I'm sure that there are still large gaps within our district where there are students who do have an IEP who could benefit from assistive technology, who probably do need to have some of these special factors in their IEP. And I'm sure they're probably still not there. So it is still something that our district is working towards improving. So I would really like to hear from Carson on if you have any ideas on how we can move further in improving that area.
I always have ideas somewhere. What we're working at the state level is really providing you some supports, and we're doing this in a couple of ways. One is an initiative that is gaining ground. Basically, it's across the country, but it's Take a Minute. And what we're looking at is launching that with our districts this fall for the entire year, so that we're providing a resource for IEP teams in those selected schools, so that when they get to the special factors and they're talking about AIM and AT and all those other things, we want them to stop. And if they have a timer, set a timer, take a minute and read through that discussion, because that's more than just compliance. That's really the spark that leads those conversations into what the student really needs instead of just that compliant thing. And then we're also just across the state, and unfortunately Marietta is not going to benefit from this because they have their own student system, but we have, it's called Go IEP, Georgia Online IEP, basically. And I'll talk about this in the next slide, but we're building checks and balances in that system so that we're moving beyond compliance. And we're looking at quality IEPs. And so once we build that system, we'll be able to share the information out to all the districts, even those that aren't on Go IEP, so that it's a way to make people again think about what we're doing in those special factors. Lewis, if you will change that slide. So this is what we're basically doing. In our special factors, we've broken things down. If you can see at the bottom side of the slide, it's not just, does your student need AIM, right? It's broken down into, do they need Braille? If they need Braille, what kind of Braille? Is it embossed or is it refreshable? Do they need audio? Do they need a human reader or do they need text to speech? Are they needing large or enlarged print? And is that print paper or is it electronic? And you're allowed in the system to select any of those that the student needs, because we know that not all situations are going to be applicable for just one type of material. So if you're a student who likes to read and you're blind, you may like to read auditorily, but when you're studying something, you may really want the Braille. And instead of having a 50-volume Braille book, you may really just need the refreshable Braille display, and then some tactile graphics. So we're trying to open that up. And if you'll notice in the slide, everything that's digital is highlighted. So the reason that we did this was to be able to link the need for those types of accessible educational materials to the need for assistive technology. Because what we've seen is people will answer, yes, they need AIM in a digital format, but then AT is not considered, or it's considered but not needed. And we know that can't happen. So the top part of the slide basically is the process that people will go in. They'll select no or yes if the student needs the material. The options are grayed out, but they can still see them. until they click yes. Once they click yes, they're allowed to select any or all of them. And then we also want them to write what the specifics about it. When do they need it? What type is needed? Those types of things that you really don't get from just checking that box that they need something. And that is an optional field. And then when they close out of that, it actually auto-populates to any of the student support pages, so that it's more of a streamline and fine line between AIM and the other parts of the IEP, so that we can actually, again, move from that just checking a box compliant that, yes, we've considered it, to some really quality decision making. And with that combined with Take a Minute, we're really feeling like we've got a huge gain on our hands, not only with our districts that we're working with in the cohort, but throughout the state. Luis?
Thank you so much, Carson and Summer, for sharing how you're building that partnership that will result in building a statewide AIM system that results in accomplishing or meeting that vision that you have for Georgia. So there are a number of lessons that we can take away from Georgia's experience on what works when it comes to developing a coordinated system. First, there's the need to have a cross-functional team with broad representation, as Carson mentioned a while ago, in terms of both the roles and the responsibilities at both the state and local levels. And those teams need to work in parallel while also communicating and coordinating with each other. Second, there's the need to have a common language and common processes. And there's a number of tools that can help with that. One being the AIM pilot, and the other being the quality indicators. The quality indicators can provide that common language, and the AIM pilot can help with developing common processes so that we're coordinated. And then the final thing is that teams need to work together to prioritize any gaps that have been identified, and then work collaboratively to problem solve and to come up with ideas for how to best address those gaps. So I hope you found this presentation helpful and insightful. And thank you, Carson. Thank you, Summer. And on behalf of the AIM Center and our partners in Georgia, thank you so much for watching this presentation today.